Hello everyone, this is Ed Trice. I'm the inventor of the chess variant Gothic Chess, and I'm here to annotate a game I played against Grandmaster Susan Polgar back in the year 2006. For those who don't know, Susan Polgar was the first woman ever to earn a Grandmaster title by satisfying all the requirements as they would apply to men. She played in men's tournaments against men and earned her Grandmaster norm the same way men would have to have earned it. She also won the Women's World Chess Championship title 4 times during her career. Fantastic talent. And here is our game of Gothic chess. I was given the white pieces here. I played d4, to which Susan replied h6. Given that this was her first game of Gothic chess ever, she immediately intuited it that this bishop along this diagonal needs to be tamed. The c1 to j8 diagonal, the post on g5 is extraordinarily strong for the bishop because a knight on h3 will support a bishop on g5 that attacks d8 where the queen is. It is very possible, if you are too carefree in your deployment of pawns early in the game, that a knight to h3, bishop to g5 combination will have you lose the queen unless you interpose, say, the chancellor or the archbishop. So already Susan is impressing me on move 1 of the game. I just developed my knight on the king side, and she plays pawn to g6. Again, this is another common formation for black on this side of the board. It allows the archbishop to go free, and this bishop has a singular attack on d4 right now. So this is a common motif that's developing over here already. I free my light squared bishop on the king side. Susan pushes her d pawn, and I play knight to c3. So now I have 2 attacks on the d pawn. Again, this is a very common motif in Gothic chess, and Susan replies with just the pawn push to c6. So we see this kind of configuration of the black pawn structure very common in Gothic chess. And again, for her first game, I'm already surprised that she is playing the way someone who's been playing for 5 or 6 years at the time, such as myself, is playing. So I try to open things up with this pawn push. You can usually get away with this with a knight on c3 without having to worry about a flank attack, like pushing the b pawn to get the dark square bishop out here to do a flank check, because the knight can cover it. Without that, this flank check with the bishop on h6 attacking the queen, you got to put one of your super majors in front of it, like, for example, an archbishop, the chancellor, or the queen. So with the knight on c3, I'm perfectly safe and content to push the pawn. Susan takes it, and now she has 2 attacks on the d4 pawn. Her queen on d8 hits it. The bishop on h8 hits it. I'm only defending it once with the queen. Most commonly, my next move, which is bishop takes e4, is not played. I did this kind of in a gambit fashion to try and lure Susan's queen out, which she did do. Her queen takes the pawn, and then I come at her with the chancellor. Now, this has to be out of Susan's pattern recognition database already. This is not something that can occur on a regular chessboard. Already, if you think about it, I have a rook stacked in front of a queen in a completely open d-file. And we're on move 7. And Susan has to retreat her queen, so she finds the safest spot for it on f6. Now you can see why this pawn on h6 is so valuable. Imagine if I could play bishop to g5 here. That would be very strong. I can't. And right now, looking at the position strategically with just kind of a static summary, I'm looking at this. I'm like, hey, I've got 3 of my minor pieces developed already. Susan only has a queen in play and a couple of pawn pushes. And all that for the price of a pawn. I'm thinking, hey, I got to be good. So I come down the pike with the Chancellor. Obviously, Chancellor takes Chancellor, Queen takes Chancellor would be toast. Black would be in big trouble. His king would only have the G7 square, and it would just be ruinous to her position. So again, this has got to be something that Susan hasn't seen. A little bit risky on my part to try it against the seasoned Grandmaster. She correctly replies with the tranquil knight to G7. She gets her first miner out on the board. She's covering the E8 square. She has no back rank worries whatsoever. Okay? Now, this was a mistake on my part. It looks like a perfectly playable move, bishop to F4. I've got all 4 of my minor pieces developed. I've got an attack, a pending attack, against the back rank, and it just looks like white has no worries. Especially when this move right here, knight to D7, hems in my Chancellor in the back rank. Looks like I'm forced to play Chancellor takes Chancellor check. Well, I'm not, because I can get away with this move. Queen takes D7. You might say, whoa, bishop's got your queen there, right? Well, look what happens. Bishop takes queen, Chancellor takes bishop, checkmate. Okay? The Chancellor on D7 issues a check like a knight to the king on F8. And with her own Chancellor on E8 presently, the king's got no moves, and there's no way to capture the Chancellor on D7. So I thought I got away with a fast one, but after the game, Susan told me no, she saw that because of this move. She pushes the pawn. Look how many things get done with this one pawn move, okay? The queen now is attacking my Chancellor. The pawn is attacking my bishop. Her bishop is attacking my queen. It looks like I've got too many threats to deal with right now. But so the question is, what's white's best move here? This whole attack is going to evaporate very quickly, especially when you consider the minor piece is guarding the heavily attacked E8 square. So I decide to just forego the bishop since I'm already up a minor piece, and I castle queenside. You notice the king moves 3 times when it castles in Gothic chess. So now I've got 3 rooks, quote unquote, 3 rooks in the D file. I got the rook on D1, the queen, which can move like a rook, and the Chancellor, of course, can move like a rook. So I've got all kind of pressure in the D file, which amazingly does me no good. Susan takes the bishop on F4. Of course, I take the pawn back. Now, the whole reason why the bishop doesn't take the queen is because Chancellor takes bishop is still checkmate. Even though the king has a square to run to, the Chancellor has its rook aura on the 7th rank, and the king still wouldn't be able to move. But this is getting dangerous now. With the rook backing me up, I don't have to worry about the queen leading the attack, but things are going to come to a front pretty quickly. The archbishop now compounds the black attack against my Chancellor, and it's time to get that guy off the board. Chancellor takes with check, knight takes, and the queen's got to retreat from the bishop. Sticking in the D file, what other choice did I really have? So now the knight comes into play and hits against my bishop. You can see Susan is starting to uncoil her position now, and white is in a very disorganized retreat. So I pull the bishop back to G2. Nothing wrong with that move. Susan's bishop comes out now, hits on my queen. Queen's got to move. Susan aligns her rook in the E file and back of the archbishop to gain another tempo. When the archbishop moves, the rook's going to be hitting on my queen. So white's just getting abused in this position now, and that's the price of me playing bishop to F4, trying to just develop as many minors as I possibly could against the seasoned Grandmaster. This is my penalty. I pushed the pawn here because I desperately need to get this archbishop out and connect the rooks. I don't know if there's a better move. Right now, White's got to do something, and that seemed like the lesser of all evils. Susan, of course, is going to retreat the Archbishop to c8, which is not bad because now she has two diagonal pieces aimed at I2. I'm only defending it once with the Archbishop, which is a piece I want to move anyway. So the Archbishop is defending this with its knight aura, but she still has the two attackers, and I've got one defender. So this guy is in a perilous position. I have to move the queen, and there's no way that this pawn is going to survive. So there it goes. And I play the rook here. Now I have two attackers on her bishop. So, rook takes, archbishop takes, archbishop takes. She's not going to go for that. So she's got to pull it back, and f5 is a perfect position for that piece anyway. But the good thing about Gothic chess here, I just dropped the pawn, and nothing really changed other than not having the pawn. As a matter of fact, with my rook in the semi-open I-file, if Susan were to elect to castle kingside, her king, remember, kings move 3 times, 1, 2, 3. King would be on I8, so I have this potential X-ray attack to her king. So the I-pawn here, with me being castled queenside, it's not really a liability. I'm eventually going to miss it, but right now it's not hurting me too much. I made a hasty move here. I just played queen to c5 to get the pin on the knight, so that this knight now can't move. And I just missed this. Boom. So the queen picks up my j2 pawn now, and I was like, I should have prepared that move. But fortunately, the queen is now hitting on my rook on I1. But fortunately, knight to h3 both hits the queen and guards the rook. So, all I did was donate another pawn to Susan. Again, though, right now, nothing has changed. The absence of that j2 pawn will not impact any of the major variations that are possible from this point of the game. So Susan's just pawn collecting. I'm pawn donating, if you want to look at it that way. And it starts to show that White is having trouble, and White is continually going to have trouble finding correct moves if Susan continues to play flawlessly. So this is an obvious one, right? Push the g-pawn, get that bishop out of there. That was a strong post for the bishop. Now on d7, it's really not too effective. It's not threatening anything. It can't even threaten anything if you let it move again. So the archbishop's coming out again. That's just a strategic move. There's no tactical consideration I have to deal with. I'm just connecting my rooks in the back rank. Susan pushes the pawn to hit the queen because the queen really doesn't have too many options in terms of retreat. There's no sense in going directly backwards like a retreating rook. I've got to make a diagonal retreat, and basically both diagonals kind of suck now. So I go to a3, lesser of two evils. Susan brings the archbishop out. Now, the archbishop is X-ray attacking through to my queen once the knight moves. I see it. Susan knows it. The whole question is, what does White do about it? Now, of course, the a-pawn is dangling. Again, Susan didn't drop this pawn. Just no way. It wasn't dropped. Her attack is stronger no matter how I react to it. What am I going to do? Play queen to b3 here? Or queen to b4? Queen's running out of room. So I figured, what the heck? She stole some pawns from me. I'm going to take this one. Knight to b6, of course, is the reply. The knight's hitting the queen now. Bishop is hanging now. So obviously I can't take it with the rook because the queen's gone. So if I lead with the queen, can my queen get trapped? If my queen is on d7, am I going to run out of retreat squares? So starting to use a bit too much of my time on the clock, so I just made this very quickly because I didn't see a refutation of it. I didn't believe there was one at the time, and then boom. You know, knight takes knight. It looks like, oh, let me just play pawn takes knight here. Then look at this. Archbishop to a3. Checkmate. So, well, not checkmate. King still has d2, but that would be a deadly blow right there. So I can't just gobble up the knight. So I took the archbishop off the board here. The queen retakes. Now I figured, oh, okay, this move is good. I'm hitting on the queen, you know. But Susan has an amazing reply here. I was thinking, hey, knight takes a2 check, king b1, and I started looking down into this deep well of possibilities, and I saw a way I could sneak a draw out of it, potentially threatening repetition of moves. But Susan plays knight to e2 check here. It was one of those moves you don't really expect. And I'm just looking at the position, kind of flabbergasted. I'm like, how did I miss that? King's got to go to b1, and then this move. This is a beautiful move. This is what distinguishes the touch of the Grandmaster from the rest of us who wish we could play like that. Now, the bishop is obviously hitting on my rook on e1. I can't play rook takes knight. The queen's going to come down the pike. I can't take pawn takes bishop because then queen to a3, right? And then knight to c3 is starting to close the curtains on me. So what can I do? I have to take it and just let the knight take with check. King's in a1. My rook is hitting on the queen. I'm thinking that's got to be some sort of saving move for me, but no. Susan can completely ignore it. And I'm thinking, my first reaction is, first of all, I have about maybe 3 minutes left on my clock. I'm like, there's just no way that happened. I can't get away with rook takes queen because rook takes the pawn is checkmate. And I said, I should just resign here. And Susan said, so soon? And I took that to mean she really wanted to play the checkmate. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, you're absolutely right. Rook takes queen. Rook takes pawn, checkmate. Can't move to b1 because the knight's got me there. So this was my game of Gothic Chess with Grandmaster Susan Polgar. I thank her tremendously for playing this game with me. She did this after she played a 60-board simultaneous exhibition on October the 14th, 2006 in Philadelphia. And this was, of course, when we were making preparations for Bobby Fischer to play Anatoly Karpov in Gothic Chess. And Susan agreed to be a substitute for Bobby if, for whatever reason, Bobby Fischer would not play the match, resume the match, or any other type of Fischerism happened during the course of the match. She agreed to play against Anatoly Karpov for the portion of the purse that we had raised at that point, which was $15 million total. $10 million to go to the winner, $5 million to the loser. Anyway, that's why she was in town, and I got drubbed, as you can see. Thought I was doing good. Obviously, she outfoxed me, and I salute her talent, and she's also a wonderful person. Thank you, Susan, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching.